Hey, it's Holy Monday, and I thought I would do a Devo for it. This is the second day of Holy Week, or Passion Week, as it's known. It started yesterday with Palm Sunday, Jesus' triumphal entry into Jerusalem. And in doing so, the crowds were there. Many of the crowds were crying out, Hosanna. Others were wondering what was going on. The religious leaders, on the other hand, this was the final act. Jerusalem was a ticking time bomb. Everyone was on edge, and Jesus' triumphal entry really lit the fuse to what would be taking place throughout this next week. You could hear the buzz and the anger going throughout the town, and truly what Jesus did, his arrival in, was a strong declaration of his authority over the convictions of man. That was yesterday. Today, on Monday, Jesus returns to Jerusalem with his disciples. Along the way, he's getting hungry, and he comes up to a fig tree that has leaves but no fruit. Mark tells us that in chapter 11, verse 13. But Jesus' response to it is even more amazing in Mark 11, verse 14, when he says, "Let no one eat from you ever again." And his disciples heard it. Jesus cursed the fig tree because it didn't bear any fruit. The act here represents God's judgment on the religious leaders of Israel rejecting the Messiah, Jesus Christ. Well, Jesus and the disciples, they enter into Jerusalem. Despite being a wanted man, he makes his way up to the temple area. And what happens here is something that has happened before, about 3.5 years prior, one of Jesus' first acts on the temple. You know what? Let's go ahead and read it. In Mark chapter 11, picking up in verse 15, we read, "So they came to Jerusalem. Jesus went into the temple and began to drive out those who bought and sold in the temple, and overturned the tables of the money changers and the seats of those who sold doves. And he would not allow anyone to carry wares through the temple. Then he taught, saying to them, 'Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of thieves,'" ending in verse 17 there. And of course, this ignites the religious leaders. It grew in their frustration, but they're afraid because the people were astonished at Jesus' teaching. This wasn't the time for them to act. And in doing so, this allows Jesus, as it tells us in verse 19, that when evening came, he went out of the city. What we learn from the Gospel of Mark is Monday centers on the theme of Jesus' authority, both over created world and his right to judge. Everything Jesus did, he did with authority to make things right for what was to happen. And thus ends Holy Monday.